Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to be talking about the PSAT.
Okay.
So you sent over a document to me. I think it was called Episode 79, Testing Hell.
Yeah.
And we talk a lot on this show about the college admissions process. And of course, the PSAT, is sort of, thought of as one of those early steps you take, on that journey. It's marketed a lot of times as sort of like, your ticket to that National Merit Scholarship and all the good stuff that comes with that.
Right.
But this document makes us wonder, is it all it's cracked up to be? Is this really, the best use of students' time and energy?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good question to ask for sure. I mean, the National Merit Scholarship Program is definitely something that a lot of people have their sights on, but the reality is very few students actually benefit from it.
So let's talk numbers.
Yeah.
How many students are we talking about here? I mean, how many actually end up winning this, so-called coveted scholarship?
Right. So something like 1.5 million students take the PSAT every year, hoping for, a chance at one of these scholarships. But out of those 1.5 million, only about 2,500 students actually get that $2,500 scholarship.
Wow.
Yeah, so you're looking at less than a 1 in 600 chance of winning.
So you'd almost have better luck playing the lottery.
Pretty much, yeah. And the other thing is a lot of those National Merit Awards are earmarked for certain groups, like children of corporate sponsors, for example, so that shrinks the pool even more for the average student.
That's crazy. So it's really not a level playing field at all. But even if we set aside those odds for a second, all of those students taking the PSAT are still paying a fee, right? So how much money are we talking about here? How much is the College Board actually making off this test?
Well, the test fee is $18 per student.
Okay.
So if you do the math, the College Board is pulling in an estimated $70 million each year just from PSAT fees alone. But that's not even the whole story. They also make money by selling student data.
Wait, hold on. Selling student data. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, they have this thing called the Student Search Service. And basically, they collect all sorts of information about students, names, addresses, what they're interested in studying, their test scores, you name it. Okay. And then they package it all up and sell it to colleges for about $0.47 per student.
So they're profiting off of our information.
Pretty much. And then these colleges use that data to try to, target potential applicants.
That's kind of creepy when you think about it.
Yeah.
Like, what are we even getting in return for all this? For that $18 fee and our personal information?
Well, you get a score report.
Okay.
But it's very generic. It doesn't really give you a lot of actionable insights. So, it really makes you wonder if the PSAT is worth the cost, both financially and emotionally.
Yeah, for sure. And didn't they used to say that the PSAT was good practice for the SAT?
They did, yeah. And I think a lot of people still buy into that, but there's really not much evidence to support it. The PSAT doesn't give you the kind of specific feedback that you need to actually prepare for the SAT.
Interesting. So if it's not a real shot at a scholarship and it's not even good practice for the SAT, what's the point?
Well, good question. I mean, it's easy to feel like the whole college admissions game is rigged, but there are other options.
Yep.
And we'll talk about some of those alternative paths to college funding in the next part of a deep dive.
Okay, because right now it just sounds like the only winner here is the College Board.
Yeah. Financially speaking, they're definitely coming out ahead.
So we've talked about how the PSAT maybe isn't the golden ticket to college funding that it's often made out to be. But what are some of those other paths that you mentioned?
Oh, yeah. There are actually a lot of really great options out there that I think are way more attainable and less stressful than, pinning all your hopes on, this one big national scholarship.
Less stressful is always good in my book.
Yeah, right.
So where should people start?
Well, I would say start local. Like, you'd be surprised how many scholarships are offered by local community groups, credit unions, businesses.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I never even thought to look there.
They kind of fly under the radar because they're not like, big national programs or whatever.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
So you're not competing with, 1.5 million students across the country.
Right.
You might be looking at a pool of, a few dozen or maybe a few hundred students.
Oh, wow.
And a lot of times those scholarships, they might range from a few $100s to a couple thousand, but they can really add up.
Yeah, especially if you win a couple of them.
Exactly.
That's true. What about students who are, maybe not like straight A students, but are really talented in other areas, like writing or art or music? Are there any scholarships out there for them?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I mean, essay contests are great if you're a good writer.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and there are all kinds of essay contests out there. Yeah, for creative writing, personal essays, even poetry.
So not only could they win some money for college,
Yeah.
but it's also a chance for them to, kind of explore topics they care about,
Yeah. I mean, it's a win-win.
for sure. Okay, so we've got local scholarships and essay contests. What else?
Well, what about crowdfunding?
Crowdfunding for college. You mean like setting up a GoFundMe page?
Exactly. I know it sounds a little unconventional, but it can be really effective, especially if you have compelling story to tell.
Yeah, I've actually seen some pretty amazing crowdfunding campaigns.
Yeah. And, people want to help students. They believe in education.
That's true.
And you'd be surprised how quickly those donations can add up.
Yeah. It really makes you realize there are other ways to make college happen.
Right. You're not limited to these, these high stakes tests and these long shot scholarship applications.
Yeah. And we can't forget about the good old-fashioned part-time job.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe not as glamorous as some of these other options, but it's definitely a reliable way to, contribute to those college funds.
Yeah. And it teaches you valuable life skills,
Mhm.
time management, responsibility, how to work with other people.
Right. So it's not just about, earning money. It's also about those skills that will be helpful in college and, in life in general.
Really, it's about taking ownership of your future and, making it happen.
Yeah. That's great. So we've got, scholarships, crowdfunding, part-time jobs. It really seems like there are a lot of different paths out there.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about thinking outside the box and realizing you have options.
I love that. So if if the PSAT is not the be-all, end-all of college success, why is there such a big emphasis on standardized testing in our education system?
Yeah, I mean, that's the million-dollar question. And honestly, the PSAT is just one piece of a much bigger problem.
What do you mean?
Well, we're basically obsessed with standardized testing. It's
Yeah.
a way to measure everything from, how much kids are learning to whether they're ready for college.
It's true. I mean, we've got kids taking tests from the time they're little, and there are all these high-stakes tests, too.
Yeah. And I think it just creates a lot of unnecessary stress and pressure. And a lot of times these tests don't even reflect what kids are actually learning in school.
The document that you sent over mentioned this term, testing fatigue. What does that mean exactly?
Well, I think it's that feeling of exhaustion and burnout that comes from, taking so many tests. Like students are just bombarded with tests all the time.
Yeah, from those early reading assessments to, those big college entrance exams like the SAT and ACT. It's no wonder they're feeling overwhelmed.
And I think a lot of times, kids are being tested on material that just doesn't feel relevant to their lives.
Yeah. Or, the results of these tests don't even really impact their grades.
Exactly. So it's like, why should they even care?
Yeah, I get it.
And so what happens is they reach this point where they just check out, and the document calls it quiet quitting.
Quiet quitting.
Yeah. It's where students are basically just, opting out of the system. They might just randomly fill in bubbles on a test or, write gibberish on an essay. They're just not putting in any effort.
So it's like they're saying, okay, this is broken. I'm not playing this game anymore.
Right. And the problem is this actually plays right into the hands of people who want to dismantle public education.
How so?
Well, they'll point to low test scores as evidence that public schools are failing.
Oh, yeah. And then they'll push for, privatization, charter schools, vouchers, all that.
Exactly. So it's
Yeah.
like this vicious cycle.
Yeah.
The more we emphasize these tests, the more kids disengage. And that just fuels the arguments of the people who want to get rid of public schools altogether.
So where do we go from here? If standardized testing is the problem, what's the solution?
Mm-hmm.
Is there another way to, to assess student learning and figure out if they're ready for college?
Well, that's a great question and one that deserves its own deep dive.
We've spent a lot of time talking about, all the problems with the PSAT and standardized testing in general.
Right.
And, it's easy to get caught up in all that negativity. But I also think it's important to remember, there are other options out there.
Absolutely.
And that students have agency. They don't have to just accept this system.
Right. I mean, the PSAT is not the only path to college.
Not at all.
And it's definitely not the only measure of a student's worth or potential.
Right. And I think that's what we really need to focus on changing.
Yeah, like moving away from this idea that standardized tests are the be-all and end-all.
Exactly.
We need to start valuing other forms of assessment.
So what would that look like? What are some of those alternatives?
Well, one thing I think about is project-based learning,
Okay.
where students really get to dive deep into a topic that they're passionate about
Uh,
and then create something, like a research paper, a presentation, a piece of art.
yeah, it's more about applying their knowledge and skills.
Exactly. And it gives them a chance to showcase their creativity, their critical thinking skills.
That's so much more meaningful than just filling in bubbles on a test.
Right. And another thing I really like is portfolios.
Portfolio.
Yeah. Imagine like a collection of a student's work, over time.
Okay.
It could include writing samples, art projects, lab reports, even reflections on, what they've learned.
That's a really cool idea.
It gives you a much more holistic picture of a student's abilities and their growth.
Right. You're not just reducing them to a single score on a single test.
Exactly. And I think it's important to give students more ownership over their learning, too.
How so?
Well, have you ever heard of student-led conferences?
No, but that.
So basically, instead of the teacher and the parents, meeting to talk about the student actually leads the conference.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, they talk about their progress, their challenges, their goals.
That puts them in the driver's seat.
Exactly. And it turns assessment into a collaborative process.
That's awesome.
And of course, teacher feedback is so important too.
Yeah. A thoughtful comment from a teacher who really knows the student can make a world of difference.
Absolutely. Teachers are in the classroom every day. They're seeing students learn and grow.
Yeah, their insights are invaluable.
And we need to create systems that actually value those insights instead of, relying on these corporate created tests.
So it's about, empowering teachers, engaging students, rethinking what assessment really means.
Exactly. Moving away from this one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah, because every student is unique.
Every student learns differently.
We need to celebrate that diversity.
Absolutely. And, ultimately, it's about shifting our priorities.
What do you mean?
Well, right now, the system is so focused on standardized tests and, corporate profits.
Yeah, it's all about the bottom line.
But we need to put students first.
Focus on their well-being, their growth, their genuine learning.
That's what really matters.
I couldn't agree more.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
But I think the main takeaway is that we need to start questioning the status quo.
Yeah, don't be afraid to challenge the assumptions.
There are other ways to do things.
And we have the power to change the system.
It starts with awareness.
With asking questions.
With demanding better.
For our students, for our schools, for our future.
Exactly.
This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
I agree.
I hope it's inspired people to think differently about education.
Me too.
To get involved, to advocate for change.
Because we can do better.
We have to do better.
Absolutely.
That's all the time we have for today, but thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.